Good evening, and welcome to Know Your Rights virtual workshop for Alameda County community-based service providers. We're really happy to see all of you tonight, and we are very eager to get this show on the road. My name is Serena Chen, and I work in Supervisor Lena Tam's office, District 3, and together with District 1, we are putting together this webinar to really get everybody up to speed and to know what we need to know in order to fully protect our residents who are immigrants. Let's see. Next slide. Sorry, I'm technically unsound today. For those of you who need interpreters, we have interpreters in 3 languages. And in order to hear your interpretation, select the language channel that is according to the language you need. The 3 languages are Chinese in Mandarin, Spanish, and Thai. So what you want to do is go to the interpretation symbol that you see here, and then you need to mute the original audio and to check the box that has the audio that you want. Let's see. So let people read the instructions and get on the correct channel. We will be posting a transcript of tonight's proceedings after tonight, and the transcript will be available in all 4 languages, in English, Chinese, Spanish, and Thai. So if you're worried about missing anything, you can always read it afterwards as well. The slides will also be available, as will the video. And the video will, I guess, I'm not sure, well, I'll check, but this hopefully will help people figure out what we all need to do. So next slide. We have a packed agenda tonight, and it's going to start out with just a little preamble, a welcome, which I'm doing. And then the supervisors will introduce themselves, followed by federal updates. The Alameda County's lobbyists in Washington, D.C. will be presenting the most up-to-date things that have happened. So the ink is still wet. We will also have State Senator Jesse Arreguín and Assemblymember Mia Bonta talk about what the Senate and the Assembly have done and will be doing. And then we have Jackie Gonzalez from the Office of the Attorney General talk about what the Attorney General's office is doing. Since this is a county forum, we are very proud of all the work our county departments have been doing, and we will have our department heads or their representatives talk about what's happening and the services provided by Alameda County Health, Social Services, the Sheriff's Office, the Public Defender's Office. And then for the last third, more or less, of this presentation, we will have a SILIP represented by Centro de Legal, really give the meat and potatoes or rice and soy sauce or any other thing, but the main part of this session, which will talk about what community-based organizations need to know on how to best protect their staff and their clients as we all move through this brave new world. So before we launch into the forum, let's have the next slide. We wanted to give a bit of context. Next slide, are we here? Okay. Why do we care so much? Well, basically, if you look at this map provided by the Alameda County Health CAPE unit, the research unit, we now have an up-to-date map of where immigrants live in Alameda County. And so the darker the color, the more immigrants live there. Next. Immigrants can be any one of these 5 groups. They can be naturalized citizens, lawful permanent residents, temporary migrants, humanitarian migrants, and other foreign-born residents who were not U.S. citizens at birth. 1 out of every 2 children live in families with at least one immigrant parent. So if you think about it, the children of Alameda County, half of them, over half of them, are children of immigrants. So if anything happens to one of their parents, we're disrupting entire families and neighborhoods. Next. Next slide. Okay, so 1/3 of Alameda County residents are born in another country, but it's not like everyone is just fresh off a boat. Actually, 3 out of 5 immigrants have been living in the United States for 17 years or more. And also, again, the most recent data from the Cape Unit is that 50% of Fremont's residents, over 50%, are immigrants, and over 40% Union City, Newark, Hayward, and Dublin, and 35% of San Leandro, Ashland, Cherryland, Newark, and San Lorenzo, Hayward Acres, and Pleasanton. So a substantial part of our county, especially in the darker colored areas you see, are strongly immigrant populations. Next. So where are they from? Well, 62% of the immigrants in Alameda County are from Asia. So you can see that, and that matches with the fact that 1/3 of Alameda County residents are of Asian ancestry, and they represent the largest racial grouping. So Asian Americans are the only racial group that is majority foreign-born. Any changes to immigration policy will disproportionately impact Asian Americans. Next. So just for a snapshot, at least 25% of all the workers, people who work in Alameda County in the civilian workforce, are immigrants. And that includes everything ranging from low skill to high skill industries. And you can see by these numbers, you know, look around you, most likely your coworker is an immigrant. Next. So the threats of deportation have already impacted our communities. Based on what happened in Trump 1.0, there was a decrease, and there will be a decrease in reporting of crimes, a decrease in seeking healthcare and other services, social isolation, decline in school attendance, and decrease in available workers. And we all know, all of you know, for those of you who are community-facing agencies, there are heightened fears of arrest and deportation, increase in anti-immigrant hate crimes, and the potential of family separation. Next. So this is why we're putting on this Know Your Rights Forum. Immigrants who know their rights are less likely to be detained and deported, less likely to be deceived by misinformation, and more likely to be able to protect their rights and those of their loved ones. So that's why we're putting on this forum, because the more you know, the more we are immunized, inoculated, and prepared for whatever is coming next. So I'd like to introduce our 2 hosts, and Lena Tam, Supervisor Lena Tam, will explain the purpose of this forum.
Thank you, Serena. And I appreciate laying out the background and the demographics of the immigrant community in Alameda County. So I wanted to welcome everybody and thank you all for joining us tonight. We've had an incredible response to this forum, and so it's clearly very much needed. And we need to make sure that our immigrant community in Alameda County, which, as Serena mentioned, is almost 1/3 of our county's population, is well protected. So I want to thank Serena Chan, Celine Wang from my office, District 3, and Cynthia Munoz Ramos from District 5, Nikki Fortunato's boss's office, for pulling together the resources and making sure that we have that we're armed with the knowledge that we need. So our purpose this evening is to make sure that you have the most up-to-date information on the federal front, that you have the protections and actions that the state of California has recently put in place, and more importantly, how each of the agencies in Alameda County, our healthcare department, our social service, our public defender, and our sheriff departments, and the board of supervisors are doing in responding to the need for these protections. So the best practices and protocols for the workplace and how to protect your clients and your staff is the core part of tonight's discussion. And we want to come out of this forum with knowing what your rights are
Next.
and how organizations can best protect their employees as employers, and also how to create the appropriate protocol in responding to ICE if they show up at your workplace, and also the organizations where you can get the resources that you need to assist your clients and your employees. So it's a very jam-packed agenda, and at this point, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, our newest board member from District 5, Supervisor Nikki Fortunato Bass.
Thank you, Supervisor and Board Vice President Tam, for co-hosting this session with me. I wanted to make sure we also thank not only our staff who have been working to organize this and our county staff, but also our interpreters. Really glad to have this forum in multiple languages. I wanted to briefly share that as a daughter of immigrants from the Philippines, this issue is very important to me, as I know it is for many of us participating in this forum. We want to make sure that immigrants and refugees in our community know that Alameda County has your back and that your elected officials are here to listen as well as partner with you. I wanted to share that over the past couple months, myself and the board have been taking action to make sure that together we are all informed, prepared, and protecting our due process. To that end, at the end of January, the board approved an ad hoc committee called Alameda County Together for All. And the purpose of that committee is to ensure a coordinated response to any federal policies or budget actions that might impact our most vulnerable residents. We've even been able to begin allocating money so that our public defender's office and community organizations doing important work on the ground have the resources they need to protect our communities. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I will just mention that the next meeting of Alameda County Together for All is at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. We invite you to join us in person or on Zoom. We are going to discuss the important issue of data privacy and what you need to know, given that so much of our personal information is collected as data as we access services. But I want to make sure we have plenty of time to hear from our resource people who are with us today. So with that, I will turn it back to Serena to introduce our next speaker, unless you would like me to do that.
Well, you gave a perfect lead in for our next speaker, who is our Interim Director of Health, Anika Chaudhry, who is going to be talking about data privacy. Anika?
Thank you, Serena, and thank you, supervisors, and good evening, everyone. By way of background, Alameda County Health is the agency that includes services across public health, behavioral health, and environmental health. We also oversee EMS and ambulances and ensure access to care through the Health Pack program and provide a breadth of housing and homelessness services. So our approach is inclusive, and we serve people of all ages and from all backgrounds, regardless of immigration status. I was asked to speak a little bit about client data, and the main way that we protect our clients' data is through the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, so affectionately known as HIPAA. And HIPAA is a set of federal laws that protects privacy and security of patients' health information. And so we do not disclose information that can identify individuals or their protected health information without assigned consent. And we have multiple processes and policies in place to store and manage protected health information securely. HIPAA protections apply to written, paper, spoken, and electronic data. And the regulations apply to all patients and clients, regardless of immigration status. So all of our staff in the agency, as well as community-based organizations that we contract out with, who are providing client services are required to participate in annual HIPAA privacy and security trainings. And then additionally, we also have various data sharing agreements with our partners that offer additional protections and guidance on how we're sharing information. And we also comply with various state laws, which sometimes actually provide additional protections. So for example, for substance use data or reproductive health data. So in short, we do not share data without specific permissions and only with those who have a need to know to support a person's health and well-being. And immigration enforcement activities do not fall into that category for us. And so we've also been, letting our staff know that should ICE efforts, ICE agents or, enforcement activity show up at any of our places of work or clinics and et cetera, that they're to immediately call the supervisor, and then we have processes in place to manage that. But we do not plan to share any data. And lastly, I will note that because we provide safety net services, we do collect data related to clients' eligibility for medical and social services. And some of that data is required to be shared with state and federal programs because of the funding requirements. So again, kind of in this climate of uncertainty, we're making sure to let our clients know that they have the right to not answer any questions that they don't feel comfortable answering. And we're here to support them. And we really want to make sure that, people are continuing to access the services that they need, regardless of what's happening, because as of right now, our doors are open. You're welcome to come in and we're there to serve people for what they need. So I'll turn it back to Serena.
I got all excited about Supervisor Bass sharing that we were going to do data protection. So I jumped over several other speakers to get to Anika, which is fine.
Sorry.
But no, it's my problem. But what I'd really like to do at this point is turn it over to our lobbyists in Washington, D.C. This is the firm that informs us as to what's going on in Washington, D.C. and what's happening. And so the freshest, newest information as of today will be presented by Lynn, whose last name I can't pronounce, and she'll introduce herself, but she's with the firm of CJ Lake, which is our county's Washington federal lobbyist. Let's turn it over to Lynn Jaquez.
Thank you so much, Serena. So it has been a busy 6 weeks, and it's hard to believe that it's only been a month and a half, but there we are. As many of you know, and all of you know, on January 20th, the president issued essentially 5 executive orders and 1 declaration of emergency that related to immigration and border enforcement. The declaration of emergency, which is a very significant element to this, is the one that allows significantly expanded executive orders and authorities, many of which were also enacted in the early days of the pandemic, you may recall. And those have been reinstated and are due to this declaration of emergency. It also allows for the deployment of military assets. And so this declaration of emergency is almost perhaps a single element that occurred on that day in order for border enforcement and many of the interior enforcement activities that we are seeing, particularly from a personnel perspective. The rest of the orders that were issued on January 20th did a whole plethora of activities, including suspending refugee admissions for a period of review of up to 90 days, and then requiring subsequent 90-day reviews of those admissions during every period, suspended funding for nonprofit organizations that were supporting and legal services, initiated expanded vetting procedures at visas and in the United States for those that were seeking visas, either of a temporary or permanent nature. The green cards terminated the parole programs for the CHVN countries that had been in existence, reinstated expedited removal and detention policies. It reinstated the Remain in Mexico policies for asylum seekers and authorized enforcement activities in previously secure and/or protected spaces. The declaration of emergency, as we saw, allowed for the deployment immediately of a roughly 1,500 to 1,800 military personnel to the border, but it also expanded that authority to access additional military assets, including planes, transportation sectors, and detention space in particular, which is in very short supply. The breadth of the enforcement initiatives come with many significant challenges. And I think, as I shared at the board presentation earlier, first and foremost among these challenges is simply funding and personnel. It takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of individuals in order to accomplish the type of personnel, the type of enforcement activities that President Trump vowed to 1 million deportations a year. And that does not exist currently. In addition, we only have roughly 35 to 40,000 detention facilities for the, at a minimum, targeting those with criminal records, over 300,000 that are in the pipeline on that, let alone the additional millions that are targeted for unlawful presence. Another challenge exists in any type of immediate deportation and expedited removal process, that if it is outside land access, if you will, immediacy across the border, you have to have transportation assets to do that. And there are no planes available to do that outside of military assets. And that is proving to be a challenge as well. And finally, a major impediment also exists in that you have to have, particularly in the focus and targeting of the return of criminal aliens, the acquiescence and cooperation of receiving countries in order to receive those flights. And we've seen quite a bit of strong arming and negotiating going on in order to obtain the permissions of those receiving countries. So given all of these impediments, of which the Department of Homeland Security is very well aware, DHS has moved aggressively to deputize other agencies, including State Department, Internal Revenue Service, DEA officers, and Alcohol Bureau, Bureau of Alcohol, and others, and also has moved aggressively to broadcast and initiate policies that would incentivize self-deportation, which after all is the most efficient use of resources, right, is to really incentivize that. Just last week, DHS announced enforcement and the criminalization of what's called the Alien Registration Act, which is a 1940 law that requires everybody living in the country that is not a legal permanent resident or that is not a U.S. citizen to register using a particular form. And in this instance, they have indicated that failure to register by individuals will actually result in criminal penalties, with the hope that that is going to bring folks forward. And then in addition, the Secretary announced last week as well a cooperative initiative with the Internal Revenue Service that would utilize non-Social Security number filers called ITINs in order to perhaps identify those that might be of questionable status or undocumented status in the United States. The administration has threatened to suspend federal funding to sanctuary cities. And in fact, just today, I monitored the House Committee a Government on Oversight hearing that basically mandated the appearance of the 4 mayors from Chicago, Boston, Denver, and New York to testify in front of them as to their so-called sanctuary policies and the impediments that prevents. And then we also anticipate expanded workforce enforcement that I know will be addressed in the I-9 space, and Social Security no-match letters in the worksite space as well. And on the major impediment, which is the lack of funding and resource and personnel for these initiatives, I know all of you have been following the progress of the so-called budget resolution and reconciliation process. And it is through this process, which avoids the need for 60 votes in the Senate, that funding will be significantly ramped up and directed to the agencies of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense to carry out these purposes. The Senate has a bill that involves funding specifically for asylum reform and immigration enforcement. The House's budget resolution is much broader, but it also contains those elements. The House and the Senate are negotiating now to come up with a single budget resolution that would then give direction to the committees to identify the funding and policies to support these enforcement activities and move forward with the reconciliation process. So that is in a nutshell. In addition, the final activity has been the rescission and expiration of the temporary protected status known as TPS for individuals from Venezuela and Haiti. And we expect that more announcements suspending nationals that have TPS status will be coming as well. So all of this serves to increase, quite frankly, the number of those that are unlawfully present in the United States and increase the challenges that the administration has to enforce that. So hence their aggressive ad campaign on self-deportation, as I mentioned earlier. So that is the latest, and we expect a great deal of continued activity within the agencies. We're monitoring them, especially on the funding, the cessation of legal services support, the suspension of refugee resettlement funding, and the impacts that it has on the county and the services that are provided.
Okay, I'd say thank you, but this is the reason why I've been avoiding national news. But thank you so much, because we need to know to be prepared and to know how we can counter things. And so the person who can help us do that is our next speaker, who is Senator Jesse Arreguín, who is going to tell us what the Senate has done and will be doing.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much for inviting me and my colleague, Assemblymember Mia Bonta, to update you all on the work that we're engaged in Sacramento to defend our immigrant and refugee communities and stand for our East Bay values. I'm honored to represent the East Bay in the California State Senate. And as the grandson of Mexican immigrants, at this time to fight for our immigrant communities, for our refugee communities, to protect our communities from the mass deportation agenda being put forward by the Trump administration. And as a member of the Latino caucus, along with Assemblymember Bonta, we are working hard to move forward critical policies and budget investments to defend our undocumented community in California. I want to lift up Assemblymember Bonta's leadership as the chair of the Assembly Health Committee. And as you may know, recently the state expanded Medi-Cal coverage to people who do not have legal status. And with the proposed cuts to the Medicaid program, the expansion of Medi-Cal coverage is under attack as well. So we are committed to making sure that we can maintain coverage for critical healthcare for all people, regardless of legal status in California. I know my colleague, Assemblymember Bonta, will speak to this and is leading that effort in the California State Assembly. But just a few things. The governor called a special session of the California legislature 2 days after Trump's election. And so last month, the state Senate and state Assembly approved $50 million of emergency funding, 25 million of which will allow our Attorney General to take legal action to fight unconstitutional and illegal executive orders and policies being put forward from Washington and threats to critical funding. Remember, these are our tax dollars that they're threatening to take away from us. And so our Attorney General is hard at work fighting the attack on birthright citizenship, fighting attacks on our trans community, our undocumented community. And this money will help ensure that his office has the resources to defend our laws and defend our residents in California. And then 25 million of that 50 million is direct aid going to legal providers like Centro Legal in Oakland to provide representation, counseling for people that are facing deportation proceedings in the state of California. We know that if somebody has a lawyer, they're more likely to fight deportation. So we know that this is a down payment. We need to increase that investment as we're working to develop the state budget over the next few months. Just a few bills on the Senate side. Senate Bill 48 by Senator Gonzalez, which I've co-authored, would protect our schools from ICE agents coming onto school campuses. And we know with the recent rescission of the previous policy that prohibited ICE agents from going to schools, hospitals, and churches, that many of these sensitive areas are threatened. And so this would provide critical protections to ensure that ICE cannot come onto school campuses. I have a bill, Senate Bill 81, which would extend similar protections for hospitals and health facilities. There are some other bills, Senate Bill 281 by Senator Perez, which would ensure that as the people are going through our legal process, that there is a advisement that's provided to citizen defendants. And Senate Bill 98 would create a rapid response network in our schools to ensure that if ICE agents come to our school campuses, that parents and family members are notified about the presence of ICE. There are some bad bills which are being put forward, such as Senate Bill 554 by the Republican leader in the state Senate, which would mandate that local law enforcement has to collaborate with ICE. And so as the chair of the Senate Public Safety Committee, I will work hard to ensure that bill does not move out of our committee and that we work to protect SB 54 and we expand protections. And I have to say that this is a challenging time. Even in Sacramento, Democratic lawmakers, with the exception of those lawmakers here and some of our colleagues, are afraid to speak out. And that's why it's so critical that you come to Sacramento, that you speak out, that you support these bills, that you demand that the state of California defend our immigrant and refugee communities at this critical time. Know that with myself and Assemblymember Bonta and Assemblymember Wicks, that we will be fierce champions for our immigrant and refugee communities, working in partnership with Congresswoman Simon, our county partners, as well to support our community at this critical time. With that, I'll turn it back over. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Okay, well, we're going to hear from Assemblymember Mia Bonta.
Thank you so much for creating this opportunity for us to be able to reconnect this way. I want to thank Supervisors Tam and Bass for really creating this space for us to be able to continue to be in conversation around such critical issues. And I just want to say off of the top that none of this is normal. We should not normalize what we are experiencing now. We should lean into and acknowledge the hurt that we are experiencing from such hateful rhetoric that is being spewed on the daily, even as of last night, by the federal government. And I just want to thank and acknowledge all of you for being such frontline advocates and holding down so much of our community's energy and faith right now in the time that we need it the most. And I'm very proud of our collective districts for having a very coordinated effort, city, county, state, and federal efforts to be able to do that. I will say this with unabashedly that I do believe that here in our district, we are really demonstrating the way that we can organize and what happens when we do so together in our collective efforts. I want to thank Senator Adeguin for starting to just highlight some of the things that we're working on in the California State Legislature, and it's been very helpful to be able to work with him under his leadership, particularly holding down the hard fights that you will have in public safety as a lot of bad ideas and hateful rhetoric tries to transform into policy in the state of California. But I guarantee you that we will be holding down the fort and fighting as hard as we can. I wanted to just mention and build on some of the things that Senator Adeguin focused on. One is that we have another budget ask that we are making. I'm championing and working with Senator Adeguin on an additional $60 million in one-time funding to build on the $75 million that the governor has outlined in his budget, and the $25 million in legal assistance that we've provided through legal aid to be able to ensure that we're able to continue to reinvest in programs like One California, to be able to ensure we have the resources that we need for our frontline communities around advocacy, legal services, and immigrant and refugee support in this moment right now. I also want to highlight some of the bills on the Assembly side that we're working on. I'll start out with the two that I'm focused on. One is AB 1261, which focuses on unaccompanied minors. There are 4,000 unaccompanied minors in the state of California without legal defense. These are children, babies, as young as infants, to 21-year-olds who are not having the kind of legal representation that they need in immigration removal proceedings or in the concordant state proceedings. And we think that this is a real travesty. This bill actually largely came from the conversation that many of us were able to have a couple of weeks ago about what we needed to do, and the leadership from the Alameda County Public Defender's Office that has had a longstanding program to be able to specifically address the needs for unaccompanied minors. This bill would ensure that we have the right to counsel for unaccompanied minors in immigration proceedings, because no child should be having to face this horrific moment without counsel. And I'm looking forward to being able to have your all advocacy and support. I can't say it enough what Senator Adaguin talked about, to be able to move that forward. Additionally, I'm authoring AB 1318, which really gets at protecting our nonprofit infrastructure. The stories that you all shared about the ways in which the federal funding has been so precarious and on a dime. Many of you are having to close down, do staff layoffs, and really put at risk your livelihoods while you are trying to take care of people, was of deep concern to me. So we are focusing on specifically ensuring that our strong nonprofit service and advocacy infrastructure stays intact by essentially walling off the federal administration's ability to keep California from funding the nonprofits that we want to fund, that are doing the work of immigration support and advocacy and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and trans work, and everything that we hold dear and aligns with our values. So we will be moving that bill forward, and it's very technical, but essentially kind of allows for us to be able to wall off and continue to have California fund the programs through contracts and grants that we've already been doing for a while. We also have a slew of bills that are coming through on the Assembly side. I've taken up a lot of your time. I did want to just talk a little bit about the comment that Senator Adaguin raised around the crisis that we will have with Medicaid and Medi-Cal funding. We are deeply committed in the legislature to ensure that the expansion to Medi-Cal that we've offered to undocumented community members is absolutely critical. And we are going to fight tooth and nail to make sure that that doesn't get used to be able to offer any kind of sense of anything but human healthcare is a human right, and every undocumented person in the state of California should be able to receive that. That is not to say that we know that the House Republicans have already taken action to destroy Medicaid, to eliminate SNAP, and to jeopardize the insurance coverage for hundreds, millions of people in the state of California. And that is not going unnoticed. So we are going to work very hard through advocacy, our own lobbying efforts, and to ensure that we have the full ability to cover that. Definitely want to stay in communication with you all as that develops, because it changes every single day. And I know that is not comforting, but the dynamism of this moment really requires us to be able to just be in deep communication and to just share the developments as they are happening, so that we can all be protected. But know at the end of the day, at the bottom line, you have leadership in Senator Adeguin, in myself, and in our fellow colleagues in this district to make sure that we are holding a very strong line in support of our immigrant and refugee community.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, the work that you're doing at the state level is really important. And we're all struggling here down on the ground trying to protect immediate threats. And you're out there kind of like the first responders with your fire equipment and your fire extinguishers and just rebuilding our infrastructure to withstand what's happening now. Next, we have our representative from the Attorney General's office, the California Department of Justice. The speaker is Jackie Gonzalez. Thank you, and thank you for coming to us from the road.
Thank you, Serena, and good evening. My name is Jackie Gonzalez. I'm Special Assistant Attorney General on Immigration for AG Bonta, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening. I'd like to thank Supervisors Tam and Fortunato Bas and also Assembly Member Bonta and Senator Adeguin for all your work protecting immigrant communities. I'd like to also thank the other panelists who will come after me. I feel a special connection to the audience here tonight. Because under Trump 1.0, I actually practiced as an immigration attorney in Alameda County. So I really have a deep appreciation for your work and the understanding of the fear and anxiety that's pervading the community right now. So just to pick up the thread from the elected officials you've heard this evening, I want to lead by saying that regardless of who's in the White House or Congress, Attorney General Bonta, the California Department of Justice, my colleagues and myself are here for you as a resource. I'm here to assure you that the Department of Justice stands with you and ready to serve and advocate for all Californians, regardless of background. And this is not our first rodeo. We've been here before. We lived through Trump 1.0. The last time Cal DOJ filed more than 120 lawsuits and won the vast majority of them. Among those, we successfully fought Trump's border wall, preserved DACA, and saved really critical state funding. So between Trump 1.0, Project 2025, the comments that we hear, including yesterday evening by our president, the DOJ went into this knowing really well what we were facing, and people have been preparing accordingly. In just the first few weeks, the AG has filed multiple lawsuits, specifically those impacting immigration issues I wanted to highlight. And it was mentioned before, the DOJ has sued the Trump administration for trying to end birthright citizenship. A judge quickly granted a preliminary injunction in that case and blocked the executive order while the case proceeds. That case stands to impact or could have impacted moving forward to up to 25,000 children in our state. The DOJ also sued the Trump administration for trying to freeze $3 trillion in critical federal funding. And again, a judge quickly blocked that order. And when they did not comply, also upheld a court order, our motion to enforce. So we have to see what challenges lie ahead. We've heard from Lynn, there are many, but all that to say that you can be sure we will be ready, as you've heard, be it through new legislation, through litigation in court, or through responses to executive orders. California DOJ will be ready to protect and defend. I wanted to just cover very briefly SB 54, and this is what is known as the California Values Act, otherwise our sanctuary law here in California. And that law was signed on October 5th, 2017, and went into effect January 1st, 2018. We won't get into the details because we have a lot of panelists here and it's a complex statute, but I wanted to highlight two things about this law. First, the primary purpose is really just to ensure that state and local resources go towards protecting public safety in California communities and not toward federal immigration enforcement. And two, that the public places like schools, hospitals, courthouses, among others, remain safe places for everyone in the community. So we just want to share that under SB 54, and you'll hear a little bit more specifically about these rights from our other presenters, but that police and sheriffs are not allowed to ask someone about their immigration status. They cannot simply arrest someone only for having a deportation order, and they cannot share personal information, for example, home address, with immigration enforcement agents unless that type of information is otherwise publicly available. While there are limitations to what the state can do, we cannot block federal immigration enforcement. SB 54 is very clear that except in very, very narrow circumstances, state and local law enforcement cannot use our taxpayer money to enforce federal immigration law. There's been a lot of rhetoric around this issue, what's sanctuary, non-sanctuary, and I just want to be very clear this evening so the message to the community is clear. SB 54 and the California Values Act is good law. That case went all the way up to the Supreme Court under Trump 1.0, and it remains good law. And so the California Department of Justice will be defending that and defending communities in relation to that. The second critical component of that law, as I mentioned, is really about protecting our public spaces and places where our community access services and resources. And for this reason, in December 2024, Attorney General Bonta issued updated guidance to help staff develop practical plans to protect the rights of immigrants and their families to safely access public institutions. So these model policies and guidance are quite complex, very lengthy, but just to name a few, they include guidance for courthouses, healthcare facilities, schools, public libraries, and shelters. We will be sharing a link at the end to where you can access these resources, even if you do not see the institution that you represent listed among this model policy guidance. They offer a guideline for how you might be able to implement this at your own agency. And I think the most important thing to remember, and we heard it even from a speaker already, is just to have a plan, the importance of having a plan. So I want to close by saying that we know these are really challenging times, and here in California, we stand ready to protect you and to fight alongside you, and we value all of the work that we're doing on the ground. We know how hard it is. Our office is a resource, and we will share in the chat ways that you might report to us if you're concerned about immigration-related activity or enforcement. We have a special inbox for that, and also the link to the resources with the model policies and guidance that I've shared. If you're interested in receiving any additional Know Your Rights information or sharing just any information generally with our office, we also have a department known as the Office of Community Awareness, Response, and Engagement Care. And I will also share how you might reach out to that office. So thank you again for having us. And thank you again to all of those doing the hard work on the ground every day.
Thank you, Jackie, for your partnership. Our next segment is going to be hearing from our county agency departments. They are the front-facing agencies when it comes to protecting the rights of our residents. And we had already heard from Anika Chandri, the director of Alameda County Health. Next, we'll hear from Alameda County Social Services Representative Lorena Brisano, and then be followed by Sergeant Morales from the Alameda County Sheriff's Department. Lorena, take it away.
Thank you, Supervisor Tam. Good evening, Supervisors Tam and Fortunato Vaz, agency partners and community members. On behalf of our agency director, Andrea Ford, thank you for inviting me to present today. My name is Lorena Brisano. I'm a senior management analyst in the Office of Public Affairs for the Alameda County Social Services Agency, known as SSA. Our main operating departments include the departments of Agency Administration and Finance, Workforce and Benefits Administration, Children and Family Services, and Adult and Aging Services. We also house the Workforce and Development Board. As you can see on the next slides, our programs and services to Alameda County residents range from child welfare, foster care, Medi-Cal, CalWorks, CalFresh, and general assistance eligibility to workforce development and adult protective services. SSA serves over 500,000 Alameda County residents, which is about 1 in every 3 county residents. We work in partnership with more than 150 organizations to meet the needs of our communities. As an agency, we believe public benefits strengthen families and serve the public good. Everyone must have access to health care, nutrition, housing, and essential services to thrive. We remain committed to support and supportive of access to services for all people and families living in Alameda County, regardless of immigration status. We know there is an increased uncertainty and anxiety about healthcare and other public assistance programs in light of the current federal policy landscapes, as we've heard from our other presenters. However, to date, I want you to be reassured that no changes have been made to any of the public benefit programs administered by SSA. As an agency, we are here to help individuals and families continue to seek the services they are eligible to receive. We continue to process applications, renewals, and provide benefits and services to our clients as we've done in the past. We continue to encourage clients, members of the public, to contact our nonprofit immigration services providers if they have questions about how the use of public benefits may impact their immigration status. And this message is also relayed to our staff. We are proud to support our community partners, many of whom are here today. From 2017 to 2025, SSA has allocated over $90 million to a wide range of services benefiting immigrants directly and indirectly through legal defense, support for crime victims and human trafficking shelters, meal distribution, and benefit assistance. The agency provides employment and social adjustment services focused on refugees and asylees, offering vocational English classes and legal aid. Additionally, we provide and contract for services for juveniles seeking special immigrant juvenile status and older adults dealing with legal issues. These programs collectively aim to ensure the access to critical resources for our immigrant populations among the greater masses. As in our final slide, our immigrant relations webpage is accessible online and will contain materials and updates related to public benefits and services. Red cards are available in multiple languages in each one of our 11 office locations. Our agency is closely monitoring changes at the federal level and will continue sharing accurate and timely information with community members as it becomes available. We are grateful for the Board of Supervisors' leadership in this work, and we look forward to working closely with our fellow county agencies, community partners to support actions that protect our immigrant communities. Thank you for your time and attention. At this time, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Sergeant Roberto Morales, Public Information Officer for the Alameda County Sheriff's Office.
Good evening, and thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here and be a part of this conversation and provide the viewpoints of the Sheriff's Office. Our general order is very clear. It was written, our policy was written and designed to prioritize the safety and well-being of all community members, regardless of immigration status. There's a lot of fear in our community right now with everything that's been going on. And I would like to let everyone know, and please spread the word around, that the Sheriff's Office, as mentioned before, we don't ask for immigration status at all. You know, there's as the statistics showed, there's people, you know, in what was it, Trump 1.0, where they said that, you know, reporting of crimes went down. We don't want that to happen. If there's a victim of a crime, let us know. Call the Sheriff's Office. We're not going to ask for immigration status. We're not going to investigate anything differently. You know, our main priority is the health and wellness of the community, and our jobs and responsibilities are going to be performed at the highest level possible, and immigration status does not play a role in that at all. We do not adhere to any administrative warrants. The only warrants that we adhere to are criminal warrants that are signed by a judge, and we do not participate in any immigration sweeps or raids. And I just want to emphasize, if anyone is a witness, victim of a crime, please report it to us. You know, we have a good network with our community members. We want to keep that professional relationship with them. And if we can spread the word around, that'll be great. And I've been doing a lot of these Know Your Rights, and I want to get that information out there and put an ease to our community members. We also operate the jail, and that's another concern where people might have loved ones, friends, family members. So again, for our incarcerated population, we do not ask for immigration status. It has no bearing on our jobs or performance and responsibilities. Our main responsibility at that jail is care, custody, control, and that's what we do. We do not share any information with ICE at all. And we are in full compliance with the Truth Act, the Truth, Trust, and Values Act. And I just want to reassure our community members, we will not ask for immigration status. We do not share any information with immigration at all. And we are here together with our community, and the health and well-being of our community is our most important thing.
Thank you. It's so reassuring to know that our county departments and staff and board of supervisors are all together, the name of our ad hoc committee. And one of the big defenders is the public defender's office. So our next speaker is Rocio Sanchez, who will be talking about how, she's from the immigration unit of the public defender's office.
Hi, good evening, everyone. As I was so kindly introduced, my name is Rocio Sanchez, and I'm an immigration attorney with the Immigration Representation Unit at the Alameda County Public Defender's Office. I'm here to discuss a little bit about our services and what we're doing to address the current situation. So for a little bit of background, the immigration unit started back in 2014 and has grown to include 6 attorneys, legal secretaries, and a social worker. It was the first immigration unit to be embedded within a public defender's office in California, and since then has served as a model for numerous other counties throughout the state, including San Francisco, Contra Costa, Santa Clara, and San Diego. We provide services in 5 main areas. First, we advise criminal defense attorneys regarding the immigration consequences of criminal convictions and juvenile delinquency findings to provide non-citizens the information they need to make knowing decisions in their criminal proceedings. Second, we also provide removal defense. This includes representing individuals before the Immigration Court, the Board of Immigration Appeals, and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals when necessary. A significant portion of our work also includes representing individuals who have been detained and helping them reunite with their loved ones in the community. Third, we provide support for undocumented youth in juvenile proceedings by screening them for special immigrant juvenile status, which is a form of immigration relief for children who've been abused, abandoned, or neglected, and is only typically available when they are wards of a juvenile court, so for a short period of time. Fourth, we offer post-conviction relief services, and through this, we investigate criminal convictions that have made a non-citizen subject to removability to see whether those convictions were lawfully entered. When they're not, we go back to state court and we seek vacature of those convictions to protect community members. And lastly, we also engage in federal litigation. Through this, we challenge unlawful and unconstitutional practices from either the immigration courts, the Department of Homeland Security, to ensure that our clients and community members are protected and that the federal government meets their duties to all community members. In particular, we engage in habeas petitions for non-citizens who have been subjected to prolonged detention. So say someone has been detained for a year, they haven't had a chance to receive a bond hearing or an opportunity to present their case for release to the court. We'll take that type of case to federal court to at least get the person an opportunity to plead their case before an immigration judge. Next slide, please. So our office is committed to responding to non-citizens' needs during this quickly changing landscape. To do this, we have mobilized in a few different areas. First, we're expanding our capacity and impact. We'll be adding additional attorneys and administrative staff over the coming months. With this growth, we're hoping to assist additional people in removal proceedings, additional people with post-conviction services, and we're also trying to expand our capacity and flexibility to meet the needs of individuals who come into contact with immigration agencies and need urgent but limited services to have that readily available for them. And I want to take a moment to give a big thank you to the Board of Supervisors who reacted quickly and are making this possible for our office and for community members. We are also ramping up community education and collaboration. And by this, I mean, we are engaging in Know Your Rights presentations like the one you'll hear shortly, and providing Know Your Rights style information to individuals in criminal proceedings so that they have individualized advice to help them protect their rights should they come into contact with immigration. All of this to help minimize panic in the community. We're also engaging in legal trainings with community groups such as this one, and building a united and responsive front with other community organizations so that everyone's rights are protected to the extent possible. In sum, we're here and we're ready to serve anyone who needs it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I have the pleasure of letting our co-host, Supervisor Nikki Bass, introduce Centro Legal de la Raza. And I just have to mention that if Alameda County were a state, we would be larger than 12 other states in the union. So what we do in Alameda County does make a difference. And we have really the best state representatives, attorney general, lobbyists, and county departments. So without further ado, I'll turn this over to Supervisor Nikki Bass.
Thank you, Serena, and thank you to everyone who's participating tonight. This has been very informative so far. I wanted to just share briefly before we hear the Know Your Rights training. As you heard earlier, the board has been taking action. We have the ad hoc committee, Alameda County Together for All, which is taking up issues related to the impacts of the federal administration. Thank you to Celine who put into the Q&A information for accessing those meetings, both the first meeting we had in February as well as tomorrow's meeting. So again, you can find information to access those meetings in the Q&A. I also want to highlight that one of the first actions that the committee recommended and that the board approved is a very important budget allocation to ensure that we have the resources across the county to inform, protect, and defend our communities who are impacted. So that includes a $1.3 million budget allocation to the Public Defender's Office, which has already been approved. We are very happy that the immigration unit, which you just heard about, will be expanding. And then there's also a $2.2 million request that has been approved. And on Tuesday, we are anticipating taking the last step, which is approving the contracts to the anchor organizations who will carry out that work. So I want to just share that there are 3 strategies. The first is resourcing and preparing our communities. That will be led by Trabajadores Unidos, Workers United. The second strategy is removal and detained defense legal services. That work will be anchored by California Collaborative for Immigrant Justice. And then the third strategy is the Know Your Rights, rapid response, and other critical services. That will be anchored by Centro Legal de la Raza and led by the ASILIP Coalition, which you will hear from very shortly. I do want to share that there are community-based organizations across the entire county that are part of this collaborative, and those community organizations represent the diversity of our immigrant communities. API immigrants, Arab immigrants, Afghan immigrants and refugees, African immigrants, as well as members of our community from the Latinx community. So all of that has been very important. And without further ado, We're excited to get to the Know Your Rights training, and leading this training is going to be Lourdes Martinez, who works with Centro Legal and is, again, one of the anchors of the Alameda County Immigration, Legal, and Education Partnership, or a CLIP. So thank you so much, Lourdes, for joining us.
Thank you, Supervisor Fortunato Vaz, and thank you and others in the county for your leadership in making this happen, recognizing its importance, standing in community and in solidarity with immigrants. I also want to thank the California legislators who spoke tonight, the Alameda County Sheriff's Department and Attorney General's office. I think it's really important, you know, that the background behind tonight's presentation on Know Your Rights that I'm going to present is that, you know, the good news is ICE is struggling. The White House is struggling to carry out their mass deportation agenda because of logistical reasons, funding reasons. But one of the reasons is because Know Your Rights presentations are effective. People standing up for their rights is effective. Sanctuary policies have been effective, and having a collective approach to this is working. The bad news is that because of that, also, ICE, in their desperation, they are resorting to tactics, including arresting people that not only don't fall under, you know, how they describe immigrants as criminals, etc., but in fact, maybe people who have a temporary form of status. And so we really do need to, as they are organizing and changing their tactics, we need to as well. And I'm just very grateful for everyone who's attending this tonight and who is preparing to protect not only employees at places of work, but people that you might be providing services to who are immigrants. I hope that I hope you all can see my screen. So my name is Lourdes Martinez. I'm from Centro Legal de la Raza, which is one of the organizations and the organization leading this coalition that had initially formed during the first Trump administration, but was put on pause. This is our rapid response hotline number that you can see on your screen. And you can also go to our website to request things such as Know Your Rights informations, red cards, Know Your Rights presentations, red cards. In addition to community outreach, education, and training, CLIP is going to be and is currently holding a hotline from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, as well as providing emergency legal assistance if people if anybody in our county is arrested by ICE. And we're also going to be doing preemptive legal services, recognizing that there are folks in our county who are vulnerable to arrest by ICE, but who may not be there yet and have not had a chance to speak to a lawyer. This might include people who have an upcoming ICE check-in within the next 3 months, or who have an outstanding order of removal. We want to make sure that these folks have a chance to speak to an attorney before it's too late and they are arrested. These are the organizations: Centro Legal de la Raza, Spanish-Speaking Citizens Foundation, Street Level Health Project, Faith in Action East Bay, and Eden United Church of Christ. However, we are preparing to, and doing the groundwork to be working in coalition with organizations countywide, including hopefully many organizations that might be here tonight, so that we can be in community together, strategizing community-wide strategies for protecting our immigrant community, which, as we all saw today, is really everybody, because we are also in mixed families and in mixed communities in Alameda County. So tonight I'm going to talk about specifically in the workplace, what immigration enforcement might look like at the workplace, and how to protect your workplace, your employees, as well as those that you serve at your workplace in case of an ICE raid, or if there's an I-9 immigration audit. And we'll review the fundamental Know Your Rights information and Fourth Amendment protections that involves. So immigration enforcement at work. Prior to the sanctuary movement that led to the passage of the Immigration Worker Protection Act in 2017, immigration authorities could actually inspect work sites without advance notice, and employers could also allow immigration enforcement agents to access employee records as well as non-public areas of the workplace. And this has changed thanks to the Immigration Worker Protection Act. So today, other than for purposes of a 9-9 inspection, an employer cannot provide voluntary consent to ICE to access either non-public areas of a place of labor or employee records, unless there is a judicial warrant. And this applies to public as well as private employers. So let's start with raids, and then we can talk about I-9 audits. So a raid is when immigration authorities show up at a work site supposedly to investigate an employer, but they haven't given any notice, such as is required in the case of a 9-9 audit. So if ICE agents just show up at a work site, that is in fact illegal unless they have a judicial warrant. And that's why it's really important that we all learn to recognize what a valid judicial warrant looks like, but also that we understand if that were to happen and ICE were to conduct a raid at a work site, the Fourth Amendment protections apply, and ICE can only come into public spaces. They cannot come into private spaces unless they have a judicial warrant or consent, which is further limited by the California law that we just talked about. So public spaces do involve waiting areas, lobby, dining areas, and restaurants and parking lots. It's important to think about if you are a service provider and you want to have an area that is open to the public. If you are trying to be a space that is inviting to the public, it's important to know, that is a public space that ICE could access if they did just show up. And so private spaces are going to become very, very important, and an important way to protect our community should ICE show up unannounced. Make sure that private spaces are clearly demarcated, clearly labeled. It's a good idea for that to happen, delineating precisely the separation of the public space, such as a waiting room, from offices or other spaces that you want to designate as safe spaces, such as classrooms or service areas. So make sure those are clearly separated and marked. Never give ICE consent to enter a private space unless they have a valid judicial warrant that applies to that space. So it's really important to clearly review anything that ICE claims is such a warrant. This is an example of what a valid judicial warrant looks like. It's issued by a judicial branch court. Immigration courts and the Department of Homeland Security, these are agencies of the executive branch of the president. Donald Trump is currently the boss of all of those agencies. It is not a judicial, it's not part of the judiciary. So a judicial warrant is issued by a judicial branch court, and it is signed by a judge. It also has details as to what it is allowing law enforcement to access. So it's not just a free-for-all type of document. Courts are actually very careful to protect the Fourth Amendment and give access only with specificity. ICE almost never has a judicial warrant to allow them to enter a private space. So they're more likely to pressure you into giving consent, and that's what they do. They do sometimes use something called an administrative warrant, and it's a document that comes from the Department of Homeland Security, again, an agency of the president. It does not lawfully authorize ICE permission to enter private spaces. It does not circumvent the Fourth Amendment. This is what they usually look like. They will say Department of Homeland Security. They're not issued by a court, and they are not signed by a judge. If ICE were to come to your workplace with such a document, as an employer, you do not have an obligation to say if an employee is working on that day or not, or to take ICE agents to that employee that is named on the warrant. That's an administrative warrant. It does not have the effect of a judicial warrant. If ICE were to start actually getting courts to agree to give them valid judicial warrants, this is one of the things that the Department of Homeland Security and the White House are threatening that they're going to try and do. Remember, constitutional rights still apply, and it is a moment. Historically, it's such an incredibly important moment for us all to understand constitutional rights apply in these situations. They are not only applicable in a criminal investigation or when facing law enforcement with a criminal matter. The Fourth Amendment protects immigrants from these potential raids or detention by ICE. So you have the right to remain silent and to refuse to speak to an immigration officer. Do not answer questions such as, where are you from? Where were you born? What's your nationality? You can state, I want to remain silent. And we recommend that people carry a Know Your Rights card with you. Unless you're able to memorize everything that's on that card. This card is really useful if you are facing a situation that you may not be well prepared for emotionally, mentally. You can show this card to ICE, and a CLIP has these available in multiple languages. They're also available through the Immigrant Legal Resource Center here in the area. I think a lot of service providers are requesting them so they can also pass them out. I even saw them at the Oakland Museum of Art, and that I was very grateful to the museum for having those for the community. So I think that hopefully we will find them more and more everywhere in our community. This kind of information, by the way, is really important if you can to bring to your staff. And if you are able to host Know Your Rights presentations, please contact a CLIP. We're happy to also help you with that. But this is important information for our community. Any information you give to ICE will be used against you later. So do not disclose personal information or information about your identity. You cannot be deported without evidence that you're not a US citizen. So we really want to avoid people volunteering that information by saying anything about where they're from, where they were born, or how they entered the US. And of course, when people are faced with law enforcement, that is their inclination, is to try to cooperate. But in the case of protecting our community against deportation, it's important that people know to remain silent. Do not provide any personal documents to ICE that could be used to identify you, such as, birth certificates, passports, consular ID. And for people who have valid immigration status and wish to carry evidence of that with them, we recommend that you carry a copy, such that you do not lose or otherwise, misplace a document as important as a green card. This is just a website where this project, We Have Rights, is put together really good videos that show people how to respond and what to do, how to assert rights. And they're just good demonstrative videos for the various scenarios in which people might come into contact with law enforcement. So it's a good resource to look at. Recommendations for employers: make sure to have internal policies and protocols in place. If you have not developed a plan yet, we recommend that you go ahead and develop one. Have your important contacts already identified before an ICE raid, such as attorneys or the CLIP Rapid Response Hotline number. Practice with drills that guide your staff through how to respond if ICE were to conduct a raid at the workplace. Train workers never to consent to ICE entering the work site, and make sure you know how to verify that ICE is in fact at your work site. To the extent that we're recommending people develop, plans and protocols for schools, there is guidance on the Attorney General's website. As a result of the Values Act and all the sanctuary movement, the Attorney General's office has developed this really helpful guidance for schools and school districts. The Oakland Unified School District here in Alameda County also has a really good model policy. For others, we recommend, I think that today's presentation is potentially a really good starting point for what to think of putting in a plan. This is an example of something we want to avoid, which is false reports of presence of ICE. The law enforcement agency that you can see in this photo is, I believe, the California Department of Wildfire and Fishing. And so we are really trying to tell the community, don't spread false rumors. We want to cultivate power in our communities, not panic. Being able to verify whether something is ICE or not, that cultivates power. We want to be in community with everybody through the ASILIP hotline, to help to support community who feel unsure, but they want to verify whether ICE is in fact present at a work site before spreading false rumors. And so we encourage that people call the hotline. But there is confusion, and it's understandable. ICE agents often wear uniforms that say police, and they carry guns. They're very much law enforcement agents. However, as we heard earlier today, our local law enforcement, California law enforcement, such as the sheriff's department or municipal police departments, they are not immigration enforcement agencies. And the California Values Act, or sanctuary law, prohibits them from investigating, interrogating, or arresting people for immigration enforcement purposes. So ICE cannot deputize our law enforcement the way that may be happening in other parts of the country, and people may hear about it in the news, the national news. That is not happening here. And it is really important to help our community more and more be aware of this and absorb what this means, so they don't, our guts and our hearts will jump. They will jump with fear to conclusions. If we have ICE and fear of deportation in our mind, we might really jump to that fear when we see law enforcement. So it's important to make those distinctions. And when law enforcement shows up at a work site, to have somebody well prepared to verify whether that is in fact ICE or some other type of law enforcement. So in your plan, make sure there's a designated person authorized to talk to immigration authorities, and that employees know to refer ICE to them by saying, I can't give you permission to enter. You must speak to so-and-so. Let me call them. Instruct employees to ask ICE to wait outside, or at least in the public spaces of where you work. Without leaving ICE agents unattended, however, staff may notify others, such as clients or customers who choose to leave the premises. People do not have to stay there unless ICE has detained somebody. People are free to walk out and to leave. Just be aware that if people are inside an area marked private, it could be safer for them to stay put until ICE leaves. And so that is something also to, again, in a drill, prepare to talk to people about that. We're going to ask you to stay in this room for now. There seems to be immigration officers or law enforcement and our employers dealing with it. So do not direct clients or visitors not to answer ICE, of course, unless you are their attorney and make that representation. And, this question has come up, like, can I get in trouble for not cooperating? Well, of course, don't, that's not what we are advising. Do not lie or hide anything, but we also do not need to volunteer information. We do have the right to remain silent. So this is just a summary of some of these recommendations. And also, if you feel comfortable recording, please do. That can help document what is happening in our region. And please contact ASILIP to report these things. These are some of the questions that we would be interested in asking, that you gather this information if you do in fact experience an ICE raid at the workplace. So very quickly on I-9 audits, just to touch on that, this is another way in which ICE might come to a work site. As you know, for several years now, employers have been required to complete the employment eligibility verification form when an employee is hired. Employers don't have to keep copies of the worker's ID or work authorization document, and they cannot re-verify the employment eligibility of an employee once this is completed. So it is important to also understand, the political climate that we're in. It is dangerous for people, for many immigrants. They're going to feel it is dangerous for them to be talking about their immigration status. So we don't want employers to start to feel the pressure to understand or know their employees' immigration status. This is what you're required to do to verify employment eligibility. And as of the passage of the Immigrant Worker Protection Act, if ICE executes an audit, they conduct an audit, they have to give the employer 3 days notice at least. And I think it's a best practice for an employer to request more time and request that the audit, be conducted at a location other than the workplace. California law also now requires employers to provide notice to employees within 72 hours of receiving the notice of inspection. And this is a link to the form that will guide you through what you need to share with your employees in terms of giving them notice. And as you can see, it has to be in the language that an employer usually uses to communicate with the employee. The law requires employers to provide each employee with the results of the audit after it's been conducted. And here you see what the law specifically says about what it is that an employer needs to communicate to the employees. Even though, the civil penalties, they've been put into question, it's been enjoined by the courts. It's important to know that the actual protection that says employers should not grant access to ICE to non-public areas or employee records, that is the law, and that stands. As far as like employers who fail to comply with the notice requirements, the penalties there also are valid and apply. If ICE determines that an employer did not follow the I-9 rules, there may be, penalties, both civil fines as well as criminal penalties against an employer. And you can find out more. That does come from the federal government, so that link will send you to the handbook for employers. But as far as like what you might need to do or the consequence for employees, if the document used in the I-9 form cannot be verified, the employer will have to terminate an employee. And so that is helpful for employees to know, but that doesn't mean employers, should feel free to be asking employees, for example, about their their immigration status. Employers may not specify which document an employee must present. And as you can see, there's a variety of documents that an employee can present. So they will look into that and identify what they can provide you to, as valid eligibility verification for the I-9 purposes. Employers really cannot use the I-9 audit as a reason to retaliate against or intimidate employees. Employees do have the right to not discuss their immigration status. And like I was saying, it's just really important to remember this is the political climate we are in. Employees will not be feeling safe talking about their immigration status, so please do not ask about that. Employees should remember they have the right to remain silent, which means they do not need to feel compelled to answer any questions. And this is always particularly important for any individual who has a criminal record, because these are the individuals that ICE keeps on identifying as their top priority for immigration enforcement. As far as how to support employees after an I-9 audit, give affected workers leave while they take care of getting their papers, or allow them to return to the same positions if they do provide the verification that was required. Allow them to return to their same positions with full seniority and benefits. Otherwise, if an employee is not going to be able to return to work, pay workers any wages and benefits that they are owed, and have a separation pay policy, or consider giving extra funds to affected workers, because this will be affecting, as we have been talking about today, entire families. And please don't forget, we are now in partnership with the community in the county through the ACLIP hotline and network. So please keep us in mind and contact us if you have any questions or require any support. Again, I'm Lourdes Martinez from Centro Legal de la Raza. Thank you so much to the Board of Supervisors and to everybody who attended tonight's webinar.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We are up to the 7 o'clock time. And I know this was a very information dense forum, and everyone must have more questions. So what we can do is send out an email to everybody who attended this conference, and you can send back your questions. And then what we'll do is divide them up and, see what we can do to get them responded to. Again, thank you so much. We're just going to have to end it now because of the time limitations. But one thing I've learned is every time I attend one of these workshops, I have 10 more questions. So that just means we need to review the tape when they come out and also review the transcripts, which will be very helpful. And then I think we do have a slide that has a list of all the resources. So if you have your screen save up, can we show that slide? Hello, okay. So Celine has that secret slide. So here's the slide that shows all the different speakers that we had and their websites. And if you want a copy of the presentation slides, just aim your camera at this QR code. And any other additional questions that you have, just send it to us at Supervisor Tam and Supervisor Fortunato Bass's office, and we'll divvy them up like a poker dealer to the agencies who can answer your questions, and we'll put together a list of resources that were shared tonight as well. But again, time is up. Sorry, this was obviously going to run long because we have so much information to share with you, and then everybody on this call is really committed to making sure that we protect our residents in Alameda County specifically, but also throughout the state, and make sure that we know what we need to know to protect our clients, our staff, and ourselves and our families. And thank you again. And I think that's it.